Welcome to Don't Retire, Graduate, the podcast that teaches you how to advance into retirement rather than retreating. I'm your host and valedictorian, Eric Brotman, and today I'm joined by two gentlemen who are going to share their story in terms of how they got into the financial world, how they manage assets for clients, and how they've grown into this profession. Joining us from Bay Street Capital Holdings are Ekenna Anya-Gafu and William Huston. William, you were the gentleman who started this firm 12 years ago. You had supported the largest retirement plan in the U.S., the Thrift Plan, the TSP, which is near and dear to a lot of folks here on the East Coast because there's so many government employees near D.C., of course. William's an accredited investment fiduciary. He completed Wharton's Certified Investment Management Analyst program, and he serves as the Bay Area president for the National Association of Security Professionals, where he advocates for allocators to engage high-performing, diverse fund managers. We're going to talk a lot about today. William, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And William's joined by Ekenna. Ekenna Anya-Gafu is the Director of Planning for Bay Street, and he provides institutions with customized support for retirement plans from development through review and optimization. He's a CFP like myself, an accredited asset management specialist, a graduate of Black Hills State University, and this gentleman managed to complete a double major in finance and economics and behavioral science while playing 4 years of college football. And I want to talk about that too, because that sounds like a very full plate. Ekenna, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us. Excited to be here, Eric.
So I want to start with $1 million question right off the bat. How did you two decide, and how did you get into a business where you were really, in lots of ways, trendsetters in coming into this business that is grossly lacking in diversity?
Yeah, I can take it off for myself. Going to college and really starting to fall in love with what I thought was finance. Obviously, it was more from a theoretical view when you get into the real world. But that really always kind of captured my mind of wanting to be a part of that and wanting the information and the knowledge set. And so for myself, as soon as I was kind of getting towards the end of college, I really started to look towards career opportunities, which I, at that time, really started to realize that it's not easy getting in the career. So I think the first, dozen or so places I really looked at, they really wanted a license prior to getting in, or they wanted experience. And so I realized pretty much almost immediately that it would be somewhat of an uphill battle trying to get into the industry, but I was able to go to the discount broker route, which afforded me the opportunity to get the license. But that's how I personally got into the industry.
And how long ago was that?
I've been in the industry right now just about 5 years. And so right out of college, essentially started looking for jobs, actually prior to even graduating, really looking for those kind of, quote unquote, Wall Street jobs. And that's where I saw a lot of that uphill battle. Got it.
And Will, how about yourself?
Yeah, on my end, I've always had an affinity to investing. When I was younger, growing up, we grew up in a small town in Alabama. It's gotten a little bit bigger now, Huntsville, Alabama. But back when I was growing up, a lot of where we lived was just open space, so I would ride around in the car with my parents, and I would always point out things like, why don't we put a McDonald's here? Or, why don't we put a Starbucks here? Why don't we put I don't even know, why don't we put a Walmart here? And when I go home now, you see those things, and, when I was in high school, I would literally leave the school when I found out a company was going to IPO, and I would call my mom, call my dad and try to get them to buy the stocks, So I would call them and say, there's this company called Google, I use Google a lot more than I use Dogpile. I heard that they're going to IPO, Mom. You should take all of your money and you should buy Google, right? And I came from parents that were teachers. Both my parents were educators. And at the time, I didn't understand. I thought they just weren't listening to me, So when we see a McDonald's or when we see this Walmart come up, I would always say, look, I told you we should do that, And it wasn't until I was an adult where, I realized that this was more a function of, teachers didn't have the sort of discretionary income necessary to actually participate in any sort of large way in the markets, and especially the way that I was trying to ask my parents to. They were used to more traditional funds that were in their 403B, and they weren't actually even in a position to allocate to very specific opportunities. So.
Got it. Well, and it takes foresight as a young person to be thinking that way. So some of this must be genetic from either a parent or a grandparent or somebody. It's great that you identified that so young. But getting into this business, what was your entree to the profession, and how much of your experience was similar to Ekenna's? In other words, his was 2016 or thereabouts. Yours was earlier than that. Was your experience materially different, or were you also looking around saying it's not an easy job to get?
Yeah, it was significantly different. Again, my parents were teachers, and their parents were teachers, and their parents were teachers. And when I was in school at Georgia Tech, my father became disabled. And in Georgia, if you work for a year, you're able to get in-state tuition. And so while looking for a job for the year in order to, reduce the burden to my family for the expense of school, I received a job doing outside sales. I was doing door-to-door sales, so I would literally knock on people's doors and ask them if they wanted to change their phone system to Bell South, right? But this was before AT&T bought them. Uh-huh. And after doing that, I received a phone call or something from an insurance company, and they asked if I, would come in for an interview. After my first year at Bell South, I was the number 4 salesperson in the U.S., and I think that was more a function of desperation than it was skill, right?
Well, or at least grit, right? I mean, at least grit.
Yeah, I remember the first door I knocked on, it was this old lady, and, I had been practicing my pitch, and, I pumped myself up, I'm gonna be able to do this. And she came to the door, and I started going through my pitch, and she cut me off, and she was like, "Young man, where did you go wrong in your life? It made you end up at my door." Oh, no. And, I tried to keep going through my pitch, and she kept, just berating me. I couldn't get a word in, and I started crying in front of her, right?
Oh,
right?
No.
And then she slams the door, right? So then I went and I sat on the sidewalk, and I'm sharing this story because it's like a kind of big moment for me in terms of starting my own business. And I was on the sidewalk in her driveway, and I kind of came to this point of well, am I gonna get in the car and go home, or am I gonna just get up and go knock on the next door? It was one of those questions,
Yeah.
And I kind of put myself back together, and I went back to her door, and I apologized to her. I said, I apologized, and I told her I was sorry that I knocked on her door. And I would assume that she said, "Oh, it's okay," or something like that. Her response wasn't actually what I remember most.
Right.
But I do remember most going to the next door,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and in that career, the goal on a day-to-day basis was to get, 4 or 5 people to change their phone system. And, I think that was the more memorable thing out of the day, having such a horrific first experience and then seeing the importance of, just getting back up and trying again. And so, I think that really is what led to me, stepping out and doing my own thing at an early age.
That's an awesome story. I love the grit, and I love the resilience, and I love that moment where you figure, is this for me? Am I done, or am I going to dust myself off and go get it? And it sounds like you definitely went and chose option B, which was good. Now, when Ekenna came to work for you, did you have him knocking on doors just to make sure that he had some of that shared experience? I assume not.
It would have been. I don't think it would have hurt, man. It's definitely a way to put some armor on your back. Ekenna and I actually met because I had one of my investment accounts at TD Ameritrade, and he was working in Palo Alto at the time. I had been living there for about 4 years when he met me, and kind of to your point, there's not that many people of color in Palo Alto, and I had never come across anyone working for themselves or for another firm, that was a person of color. And so when I met him, I didn't actually immediately ask him to join my firm because I actually didn't think the timing was perfect, but I did take his information, and about a year later, I reached out to him when I thought that I was in a place to actually offer him something that was attractive. You follow? And it just so happened that things aligned. Schwab was buying TD. A lot of TD advisors were kind of transitioning into other roles, and he was, what I thought was an attractive offer. Also came with a couple of incentives that he was. Not necessarily going to be able to find by going, from one, large firm to another in terms of ownership of his book of business and equity in the company and things like that. So,
Ekenna, how do you recall those first conversations when you and Will met, and then ultimately when he made you an offer? What did that look like? What is your recollection of that?
Yeah, I think initially I was very excited. And I was getting to know Will. I was like, all right, this guy's really sharp. I just recall thinking, okay, this could work. And then it came time, when we first met to talk about somewhat of the compensation. And at that time, it was kind of not necessarily set in stone. And so I remember just thinking like, oh, okay, like I really do enjoy talking to Will. I enjoy the idea of kind of going on my own. But at the same time, I have a life to live. And I think when we very first met at that time, was doing very well with TD. But, I was still very much hey, I like TD type person. And, this is where I'm going to be for a while. And so long story short, I do recall the very first time meeting him. And I was like, all right, it sounds like a good idea, but maybe just not for me right now. And then it wasn't until almost a year later that we started re-engaging. And then I was like, you know what, actually, I do think that I could make this work. I think I have some of the connections that could, make this really start to move forward. And so that's when it became more attractive. I think the very first time I was like, hey, Will's a good guy. Nothing negative to say, but it's just not for me right now. It wasn't until probably a year later when, as Will said, he came with, in my opinion, a better offer where I really started to say, okay, how can I make this work? And really started to kind of strategize of how I could do that.
So let's talk about Bay Street Capital. I mean, Will started the company. Ekenna, you've been there now 5 years. Tell our listeners about the company, about what you do, and the impact you're trying to have on not only the industry but on the people you serve.
Yeah, and I just want a quick clarification. I've actually only been at Bay Street since June.
Oh, goodness. All right.
2020. And I had actually been, prior to that, I was at TD Ameritrade for about 2 years or so. Prior to that, I was at Schwab for about 3 years. And then prior to Schwab, I was at Northwestern Mutual for right about a year. And so I've actually, I'm still, quote unquote, under that 1 year mark. It feels like I've been here for a while, but I am still, in that 9
Got it. No,
I'm kind of guessing here.
The conversations I've had with the two of you in the past, I would have thought you guys have been working together for a lifetime. You're very in sync. So amazing that you were able to do that in a short period of months. So tell us about Bay Street and tell us about the impact that you're looking to have, not only on the industry, but on the folks you serve.
As a team, Bay Street, we want to be the best investment firm that there is. Right. So when people talk about the greats and when they're putting these top 10 lists and things together like that, what we aspire to be is the best that there is, and how we go about doing that internally as a team is we're performance oriented, so we work together as a team collectively. We're deliberate in a lot of our conversations, and we're thoughtful when we're approaching risk. As it pertains to risk, we like to look for asymmetric opportunities, and essentially all that means is we're looking to make investments that have more upside potential than the perceivable downside risk. Our strategy we've coined, the way we explain it to people, is we invest through the lens of history. So we invest through the lens of history in companies that we believe are going to outperform the general market. And how we go about explaining the importance of addressing implicit bias in institutional plans is by explaining to, larger and smaller 401k. It actually doesn't matter whose plan you're looking at. The problem is the same regardless. Regardless of how well a diverse manager is doing, whether he be, a person of color or a female or anyone who's not a white male, there's a lot of roadblocks for them to be added to these plans because there are such a small amount of diverse advisors that are advising the institutional plans. And so the reason why, part of the work that we do aside from managing our portfolio revolves around advocating for fund managers is because we realize that if we don't, nobody else is going to. There's never been a scenario at all that we've ever had a conversation with the company and they've said, we're going to decide between you guys and this other diverse firm, right? There's just a lot of the other diverse-owned firms, they're either fund managers themselves where they're running a fund, or they're doing, wealth management, but more so for individuals and families, not so much, focused on institutional plans. You follow?
I do. And, you raise a couple of very, very interesting points. One of which is that I do think particularly larger institutions and state systems and are looking for, in a lot of cases, managers to create some diversity and having trouble finding that. How do folks go from being the best kept secret to being a household name? I mean, is that a 50-year process? Is it a 3-year? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think it's with the right people in your corner. There's certain CIOs that they take they don't just allocate to diverse firms because there's a mandate. They allocate
right.
because, like us, they believe that performance matters, you see. And you start getting introduced to those CIOs and to those allocators, and even some of the, larger, more mature firms, that specifically have real programs that are making an impact in the diverse manager space, where they're looking, to allocate to first-time managers. They're not putting the 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, 15-year, sort of hurdle track performance. It's okay to take a $500 million check. They're going to write you, one that's more appropriate for the size of your fund. And, to your point, you work with what you have. I know several first-time fund managers that started a fund with $150 million or more, but I don't know any diverse managers that got that much from one allocation for their first fund. You follow? I've seen guys 10, 15, 20 years of experience before they go out, relative to some of the other first-time managers that I know. And they're still taking $1 million here and there, even though they've had a very persistent and a very consistent track record. So I think that's what we're looking to address. It's not something that I think has a specific timeline to it per se. I don't say this is something that will be solved, but I will say that in the industry, especially amongst diverse managers, the network is growing and it's maturing, and I will say we're becoming more competent as advisors to where we don't necessarily even have to take everything that comes across the door. We're looking to work with the right people and engage with the right organizations who we see that there's going to be a mutual benefit, as opposed to, how it is. You take that one client who's always calling your phone, no matter how well things are going, it's always too expensive. You see how this. So instead of engaging in anything that comes across the door, I think being, thoughtful in the type of partnerships that you take and making sure that you're actually working with people who are in your corner is a super big deal.
So, at our firm, we have 21 people, and we hire not exclusively, but we hire a lot of young people out of college. We want them to learn our process. We don't put them in door to door. In fact, we don't have any young people responsible for business development. We have them responsible for really learning. It's almost like it's almost an apprenticeship for a period of time with a career track. And we feel that's incredibly important, and we've tried to recruit in a way that allows us to have a lot of different kinds of people here. And frankly, it's because of different networks, different backgrounds, different experiences, different aptitudes. For us, it's been extremely difficult just to get minorities, people of color, women, etc., to interview. And, we have finally, I think, cracked the code along gender lines. I think we've worked really hard at that, and not on purpose. I don't want it to sound like there was some mandate like, hey, we have to do this. That's not it. We have 8 advisors here, 4 men and 4 women, and the women are amazing. And it's not that they're amazing for female advisors. They're amazing advisors. So to your point, it's about competency, But, we spoke with one of the young gentlemen working for us, and he's a person of color, and I asked him, why aren't more of your peers? And he, like Ekenna, was on the football team at a local school. In fact, he was a team captain, which I love that kind of leadership, and we look for those kinds of folks. But I said, why don't more come into the industry? He says, he goes, they don't even go to the career fairs or the meetings that are around financial careers. It's almost like they think, that's not for me. And he would like to figure out a way to change that. I'd like to figure out a way to change that, because there's a lot of very talented people who aren't even throwing their hat in the ring. So the question is, how? I know what's happening, and you're right. I'm not exactly sure why it's happening, and maybe you can shed some light on that. But I also would like to know how we change that mindset, amongst young people. I mean, you clearly were ahead of your time in terms of thinking about. You sound like Alex P. Keaton. Being 15 and going, we ought to build this over here is not a normal thing for young people necessarily, but they're out there. So why isn't this happening? How do we get there?
Yeah, I think personally, one of the biggest reasons why we see a lack of diversity in this industry is because when you really kind of, if you were to look at it from a big picture and say, okay, when are people actually learning about the stock market, or when are they learning these finance things? I would say that when you look at a non-person of color, that generally comes at a pretty early age, because their parents invested, their grandparents invested. They may even themselves at a young age have invested, or at least have an ideal about that. I think the study says that the average person takes away, kind of their financial wellness at the age of 7, and just, point blank period, in the average African American home, or just minority home, it's just not the case that finance and investing are being talked about. Even myself, going to college and learning about finance that way, my family at no point during my life brought up what a stock is. In fact, I myself, after graduating and entering the career, started talking to my family, and I realized that there is a big disconnect from investing to what they're doing right now. And so, I think the wealth gap is there. We can point that out. Understanding that currently for African American families, only 1 out of 3 are actually investing. And so I think that when you don't talk about it from a young age, the interest to be involved there at a point where you're exiting college, or even when you're going to college to choose your major, if that's just not there, then quite frankly, people aren't going to enter into the industry. And so I think, to your point of, what can we do to change that? And I'm a big advocate for financial literacy. The reason for that is if you start to teach people at a younger age, hey, this is what you can do with your money to maximize, and if this is how you can invest, then the interest starts to build up. And then by the time it is time to choose a career or choose a major or whatever that may look like, then, in the back of your mind, you're essentially starting to think, okay, how can I be a part of that? But right now, it's just not something that's talked about. And because it's not talked about, it's just not something that people are passionate about. And with a lack of passion, you see that, what we see now where firms like yourself are searching for those minority candidates and sometimes falling short. That's my own opinion. And I think that, when you look at just when people start to learn about the stock market, to me, it becomes very apparent of how that starts to shape itself.
I think financial literacy, or to even a greater point, financial illiteracy, is a serious issue. And we've worked on that here as a firm. We've worked with Junior Achievement. We're actually putting together a financial literacy online course for middle and high school students and their parents. That'll be a free offering to try and teach. You still have to get people to do it, though. You have to get people to say, hey, this is for me, or this is, I have enthusiasm around that. And there really isn't a lot of formal financial literacy education in schools, and there's lots of reasons for that. In fact, we've had guests on the show talking about why there isn't financial literacy education in schools, and it's a political hot potato. It's a difficult issue that really shouldn't be difficult. I've never met anyone who thought it was a bad idea, which is peculiar, right? That everyone agrees this is a good thing, and then no one can figure out how to do it. I'm sad to say we're running out of time, and I want to make sure that we get to an extra credit assignment for each of you. And I'm hopeful that this can be around either obtaining financial literacy or maybe breaking some type of diversity trend or barrier for the industry and for underserved populations. Ekenna, why don't we start with you if we can? I need that one takeaway from the show, something that someone who listens can say, this is what I'm going to do today, either to become more financial literate or to make a difference in what we've been talking about today.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that the easiest steps, right, when you look at the programs that are out there currently, Dr. Jason Otley, he's running a program in D.C. as well. But when you look at the programs, a lot of it comes down to funding, right? So you can have all of the good intentions in the world where you're saying that, hey, I really want to make a positive impact. And if you're someone who can, I think that an easy way to start to, kind of provide this financial literacy to the masses is finding an organization that you support and trying to figure out how you can be a part of that. Because you'd be surprised, oftentimes, you don't have to have a finance career to be able to speak, kind of intelligently about what to do. And so because of that, I say all that to say that if you find an organization, participate, whether that's via donation, whether that's donating your time, but finding local organizations, and they're definitely out there that are really trying to move forward the financial literacy programs as a whole. I think, once again, if you're trying to look and say, how can I best move forward and cut down some of the barriers, I really think it comes down to the education piece, and the education piece at a young age. And so finding an organization that you can partner with there, I do think would put kind of everyone in a better position.
Sage advice. Will, no pressure, but Ekenna nailed it.
Yeah, he did. And just piggybacking off of what he was touching on in terms of, what we can do on the front end, and also what individuals can do, with their personal finances. I think, what Ekenna is really touching on is the system itself is biased. There's not like one particular person or one particular company to blame, because the impetus for someone to save money is they're participating in a 401k for the tax deferred growth. And since, Caucasians earn 30 to 40% more than people of color, they have the income to save for their retirement plan, right? And so as a result, they are learning about what they should be putting that money towards versus someone who needs the majority of their paycheck and is not contributing to their plan. And I think the internet has been a game changer because, never before could anyone interested in finance hop on YouTube and just listen to an entire semester at their leisure. And it's the same for anyone who wants to do something about, making an impact as it pertains to diverse fund managers being given the same shot that their peers are being given. Because now you can do a Google search, and then right next to the company, it will say, is this a veteran-owned business? Is this a minority-owned business? Is this a woman-owned business? It's become very easy to determine, the type of organization that you're going to engage with. And, the organizations and associations that support diverse managers are also starting to come to, an age of maturity. So we've got company like associations like National Association of Securities Professionals. Again, I'm the Bay Area president for that organization, and it's meant for women and diverse fund managers and advisors. And the organization supports, via whether it's writing letters or whether it's, providing recommendations when the firms reach out and they're looking to do business with the institution. You follow? You've also got National Association of Investment Companies. They're doing the same thing for the LPs, for the folks that are in private equity on the hedge fund space. And on the retail side, you've got Association of African American Financial Advisors. I'm just listing off the ones for people that I'm involved with, right? But you could rinse and repeat that, and you'd find the same for, Bay Street is also in AIM, which is for Asian American Investment Advisors. You follow? So there's tons of organizations that are in place. Everyone is looking to bring together competent teams and put their best foot forward. And I think one thing that you might not hear is, we don't want to make a mistake, because a lot of times we realize that you might not get another opportunity. And I don't think that that's fair. I think people should be allowed to fail without it, shipwrecking the rest of their career. But I do think, as a diverse firm, that's one thing that we hold ourselves to, which is why, I kind of touched on the types of risks that we look to engage in. So, yeah, I would say, look to those sort of organizations. And thankfully, it's just not as difficult as it used to be to decide who you want to work with based on performance, or to decide who you want to work with based on just diversifying how you are putting your dollars to work.
Fantastic. I think you both gave great assignments. I sincerely hope that this episode is heard by folks who share our shared vision of this, and both the financial literacy, the underserved communities, young people getting access to this, across the board, and then also recognizing the incredible talent and in the industry. Of all walks of life. And so I thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. And I do hope that this show is caught by folks who are able to join some of those organizations, either because they want to be in the profession, or because they're already in the profession, or because they just have an interest in the financial literacy of their communities, and they want better for families in their area. So, guys, thanks for being on the show. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Eric. It definitely means a lot to us that you brought us on, and hopefully we can spread this out to our network as well.
Fantastic. And to all of our listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of Don't Retire, Graduate. Please help us grow our show by subscribing to our podcast and posting comments and reviews on Apple Podcasts or other download sites. Don't Retire, Graduate is a book available in print, Kindle, and audio formats, and we now have a workbook with all the steps to build your own financial freedom plan. We'll be back next week with another installment of Office Hours, and in 2 weeks with another engaging guest. For now, this is your host, Eric Brotman, reminding you, don't retire, graduate.
From this day forward, let us begin visualizing our dreams and building our futures. Today, I implore you, don't retire, graduate. Visit our website at don'tretiregraduate.com to subscribe. And please like us and post comments on social media. Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC, Kestra IS, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC, Kestra AS, an affiliate of Kestra IS. Kestra IS or Kestra AS are not affiliated with Brotman Financial or any other entity discussed.